There's a kind of emotional exhaustion that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't break down in tears or cry out for help. It simply goes quiet. It pulls back. It creates protective distance, not out of cruelty, but out of survival. And if you're a man who has felt this, you already know what I'm talking about. You know that feeling of standing in a room full of people and still feeling completely alone. You know what it's like to carry expectations no one acknowledges, to shoulder wounds no one sees, to build strength out of silence because no one taught you any other way. This isn't about men who are afraid of commitment or too immature to love. This is about something deeper, something that lives beneath the surface of modern dating culture and hides in the quiet spaces where men sit with their thoughts. It's about the invisible weight of being expected to be strong, reliable, and emotionally available, while rarely being offered the same in return. It's about learning, slowly and painfully, that vulnerability is often punished rather than honored. And it's about the quiet decision many men are making, not to close their hearts forever, but to stop offering them to people who only see what they can provide, not who they actually are. This emotional withdrawal isn't rebellion, it's self preservation. And if you've ever deleted a dating app at 2 in the morning, stared at your phone wondering why another conversation went nowhere, or chosen an evening alone over the exhausting performance of trying to be enough, you're not broken. You're responding to a pattern. And that pattern has shaped you in ways you might not even fully understand yet. Let me take you into the first hidden barrier that keeps men emotionally distant: the quiet, relentless burnout that comes from modern dating expectations. Imagine this: you meet someone. The conversation starts well enough. You ask questions, you listen, you try to show genuine interest. But somewhere along the way, you start to notice a pattern. You're being evaluated, not for your thoughts, not for your humor, not for the way you see the world, but for what you represent: your job, your ambition, your ability to plan the perfect date, your capacity to entertain, to impress, to prove your worth. And slowly, invisibly, you start to feel less like a person and more like a resume. You've been ghosted after what felt like a real connection. You've had conversations that felt promising collapse into nothing without explanation. You've put effort into getting to know someone, only to realize they were never really seeing you. They were seeing a role they needed filled, and each time this happens, something shifts inside you, not dramatically, not all at once. But gradually, you start to go numb. You start to expect less. You start to protect yourself by caring less. Because caring, you've learned, costs too much. Picture a man sitting alone in his apartment after another failed attempt at connection. He's not angry. He's not even particularly sad anymore. He's just tired. Tired of performing, tired of being measured, tired of feeling like love is something he has to earn rather than something he can simply share. And so he stops trying. Not because he doesn't want love, but because the version of love he keeps encountering doesn't feel like love at all. It feels like an audition he's destined to fail. This is the exhaustion that modern dating culture creates for men. It's not the exhaustion of effort, it's the exhaustion of being unseen, of being valued for utility over depth, of feeling like your emotions don't matter unless they're convenient, your vulnerabilities aren't welcome unless they're packaged in strength, and your humanity is secondary to your function. And when this becomes your repeated experience, something inside you begins to shut down, not because you're incapable of connection, but because connection has started to feel like a transaction you're always on the losing end of. Now, let's move deeper into the second barrier: the learned emotional self reliance that so many men carry like armor they can never take off. From the time you were young, you absorbed messages about what it means to be a man. Handle your pain alone. Don't burden others with your struggles. Be the rock, not the storm. Show strength, not weakness. And if you're hurting, figure it out yourself, because no one is coming to save you. These aren't just old fashioned ideas, they're survival strategies that got embedded in your nervous system. You learned that emotional vulnerability was risky, that showing your pain could be used against you, dismissed as weakness, or met with uncomfortable silence. So you learned to process everything internally. You learned to be your own counselor, your own support system, your own source of strength. And in many ways, this self reliance has served you. It's made you resilient. It's made you capable. It's made you someone others can depend on. But here's what no one tells you: when self reliance becomes your only emotional strategy, it transforms from a strength into a wall. You become so accustomed to handling everything alone that the idea of sharing your inner world with someone else starts to feel foreign, unnecessary, or even dangerous. Because sharing means risking. Sharing means giving someone the power to hurt you. Sharing means admitting that despite everything you've built, despite all your capability and strength, you still need someone. And that admission feels like weakness, even though it's actually the most human thing there is. So you build your life around not needing anyone. You create routines that work. You find fulfillment in solitude. You convince yourself that you're fine on your own, and in many ways you are. But somewhere in that fortress of self sufficiency, love stops feeling necessary. It starts feeling like a complication, like something that would disrupt the peace you've worked so hard to create. And so you keep your distance, not because you don't want connection, but because you've forgotten how to want it without fear. There's a man I want you to imagine. He's successful, he's stable, he has hobbies he enjoys and friends he sees occasionally. On paper, his life looks good. But at night, when everything is quiet, there's a loneliness he won't name. He tells himself he's chosen this, that he prefers solitude, that relationships are too complicated, too demanding, too risky. But beneath that narrative is a different truth. He's scared. Scared that if he lets someone in, they'll see the parts of him he's spent years learning to manage alone. Scared that vulnerability will be met with disappointment or rejection. Scared that after everything he's survived on his own, needing someone might be the one thing that breaks him. This is the cost of learned self-reliance. It protects you, yes, but it also isolates you. And the longer you live behind that wall, the harder it becomes to imagine life without it. Now we come to the third barrier, one that's rarely discussed openly but felt intensely: the fear of emotional mismatch and the loss of autonomy. Many men who have been in relationships know what it feels like to lose themselves, not in the romantic, poetic way, but in the suffocating way, where your needs become secondary, where your peace is constantly disrupted, where you're expected to be emotionally available on demand, but your own emotional needs are dismissed as selfishness or immaturity. You've been in conversations where you tried to explain how you feel, only to have your feelings minimized, misunderstood, or turned into evidence of your inadequacy. You've been told you're emotionally unavailable when you just needed space. You've been accused of not caring enough when you were simply caring differently. And you've experienced the slow, creeping sense that in order to keep the peace, you have to sacrifice pieces of yourself: your routines, your solitude, your way of processing the world. This creates a deep psychological fear that love means losing autonomy. That commitment means surrendering the life you've built. That being in a relationship means constant negotiation, constant compromise, constant emotional labor that leaves you drained rather than fulfilled. And this fear isn't immaturity, it's a rational response to real experiences. You're not afraid of love itself, you're afraid of what love has cost you before. Think about the man who finally ends a long relationship and feels relief instead of grief. Not because he didn't love her, but because he can finally breathe again. Because he can have a quiet evening without it being analyzed as distance. Because he can focus on his work without it being framed as neglect. Because he can exist as himself without constantly managing someone else's emotional expectations. And when he feels that relief, he makes a quiet decision: never again. Not because he's given up on love, but because he's given up on relationships that require him to shrink. This is why so many men choose solitude over partnership. Not because they're incapable of commitment, but because they've learned that commitment often means compromising their psychological safety. And when you've fought hard to create a life that feels stable, peaceful, and authentically yours, the idea of risking that for a relationship that might demand you become someone else feels impossible. But there's a deeper layer still. The fourth barrier, disillusionment with modern relationship dynamics. This isn't just about bad experiences, it's about the slow erosion of hope. It's about reaching the point where you stop believing that real, mutual, emotionally fulfilling love is even possible. You've watched relationships around you fail. You've seen marriages end in bitterness. You've witnessed friends give everything to partners who took them for granted. You've been lied to, cheated on, or emotionally manipulated. And with each disappointment, your belief in love has taken a hit. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly in the background where hope used to live. Modern dating culture accelerates this disillusionment. Swipe apps reduce human connection to a photo and a few lines of text. Conversations feel transactional, shallow, performative. Everyone's looking for something better just one swipe away. Commitment feels rare. Depth feels rare. Authenticity feels rare. And you start to wonder if the love you're searching for, the kind that feels safe, real, and mutual, even exists anymore. Or if it's just something people pretend to want while they're really just looking for validation, entertainment, or someone to fill a temporary void. Picture a man lying in bed, scrolling through his phone, seeing couples posting perfect moments that he knows are curated lies. He's not bitter, he's just done. Done pretending he believes in the fairy tale. Done investing emotional energy into connections that evaporate the moment something shinier appears. Done hoping that someone will see him, really see him, and choose him not for what he provides, but for who he is. And so he stops, he closes the app, he deletes it, and he chooses silence over the exhausting cycle of hope and disappointment. This is the quiet detachment that happens when trying stops feeling safe. When you've been hurt enough times that protection becomes more important than connection. When you'd rather feel nothing than feel discarded again. And the most painful part? This detachment doesn't mean you've stopped feeling. It means you've stopped believing that your feelings matter to anyone else. Throughout all of these barriers, there are small moments that reveal the depth of this struggle. The man who chooses not to text back because he's tired of small talk that goes nowhere. The man who declines invitations because social performance feels exhausting. The man who sits alone on a Friday night and feels relief instead of loneliness because at least here in his solitude, he doesn't have to explain himself. The man who has conversations in his head with partners he'll never have because in his imagination, he's finally understood in ways he never has been in real life. These men aren't cold, they're not broken, they're not emotionally stunted or afraid of intimacy. They're just tired. Tired of being misunderstood, tired of being valued for what they do rather than who they are, tired of vulnerability being weaponized, tired of love feeling like a performance they can never get right. And so they withdraw, not into hatred or bitterness, but into silence, into self protection, into lives that feel manageable because they've removed the variable that hurt them most, other people's expectations. But here's what I need you to hear, even if it's uncomfortable. Emotional withdrawal is not the same as emotional freedom. Protecting your peace is wise. Setting boundaries is healthy. Choosing solitude over bad relationships is self respect. But there's a difference between choosing to be alone and hiding behind that choice because you're afraid to be seen. Your caution is real. Your experiences are valid. The pain you've carried, most of it in silence, is real. The disappointments, the betrayals, the moments where you felt invisible or used or misunderstood, all of it shaped you. And it makes perfect sense that you'd build walls, that you'd retreat, that you'd decide love isn't worth the risk. But walls that protect can also imprison. And the longer you stay behind them, the easier it becomes to forget what it felt like to want connection without fear, to share yourself without armor, to be loved not for what you provide, but simply for existing. That kind of love is rare, yes, but it's not impossible. And the real tragedy isn't that you might get hurt again, it's that you might miss it entirely because you've convinced yourself it doesn't exist. You don't have to lower your standards. You don't have to accept relationships that drain you or partners who don't see you. You don't have to sacrifice your peace for someone else's expectations. But you also don't have to stay in hiding. You don't have to let past pain dictate future possibility. You don't have to confuse emotional protection with emotional isolation. Love, real love, doesn't demand that you shrink. It doesn't require you to perform or prove your worth. It doesn't punish you for having needs or exhaust you with constant emotional labor. Real love sees you. It meets you where you are. It honors your silence and welcomes your words. It makes space for who you actually are, not who you think you need to be. And I know that might sound idealistic. I know you've been disappointed before. I know hope feels dangerous when you've had it shattered too many times, but here's the truth. Your heart is still there. Beneath the armor, beneath the walls, beneath the carefully constructed independence, there's still a part of you that wants to be known, that wants to share your life with someone who gets it, that wants to love and be loved without fear. That part of you isn't naive. It's not weak. It's the bravest part of you, and it deserves more than a life spent in self imposed isolation, no matter how comfortable that isolation has become. Your silence is not weakness. Your distance is not coldness, but don't let your walls become your world. Love can only meet you where you're willing to be found.